Hello, my name is Michael Turner. I'm the Sports and Culture Attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, Japan. Thank you for joining us today for a panel discussion on studying abroad. Today, we have two excellent panelists, Dejia and Yusuke, who will introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their experience studying overseas. So with that, let me turn it over to Dejia for a Chico Shokai. Dejia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Dejia. I recently graduated from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC, in May, and I studied abroad in Nagoya at Nanzan University. This towel actually is of the mascot for the Tsubushi Dragons in Nagoya. This is Dowala. He's a koala.
And it looks very great.
Yes, I use this towel to both dry my hands and cheer the team on.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, and I received a Watanabe scholarship, which covered a majority of my costs while studying abroad in Japan. So I'm very thankful for that. But what I've been up to recently, so I'm preparing to go on the JET program, the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. In January, fingers crossed, we can go on the 6th. We were supposed to go in September of this year, but things got delayed due to the COVID-19 situation. Some other things I've been up to, weekly I volunteer with a group called North Ave Mission. It's a fellowship of unhoused and formerly unhoused people, as well as their supporters in inner city Baltimore. We walk together as we advocate for justice, dignity, and care for our community. I've also continued my virtual student federal service internship with Education USA, where I engaged US colleges and universities and campus student organizations to encourage representation of students from Northeast Asia and the Pacific region. Lastly, I've been tutoring. So on the JET program, I'll be an English teacher. So I wanted to try to get some practice before I went. So I started volunteering with the Esperanza Center in Baltimore during my last semester of school. And then I shifted to online English tutoring after graduation. And I've had the pleasure to meet people from all around the world while tutoring. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Dejia. Yusuke, can you tell us about yourself, where you've been and where you are now?
I got it. Hello everyone, my name is Yusuke Kido. I am from Keio University in Japan. I am doing research about medical robots now. I studied in University of California, Santa Barbara from last September to this March. I received Tomodachi Sumitomo Corporation scholarship programs. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you both for joining us today. And again, I'm Michael Turner at the U.S. Embassy. And I should mention that my first time coming to Japan was on the JET program. And it had a profound effect on me. And as you can see, just over my left shoulder here, Iwate-ken, where I had the pleasure of living and working for 2 years. So panelists, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you to our audience for also joining us. Let's jump right into this. Tell me, Dejia, a little bit about something that happened to you on your experience here in Japan. Tell us about a memorable experience that had an impact on you.
Mm-hmm. So I have two very memorable experiences. Hands down, my most memorable experience was the Black Women in Japan convention I went to in Kobe. I was surrounded by phenomenal Black women in Japan doing phenomenal things, and I felt inspired to do equally inspiring things. And it really recharged me to finish my semester strong over there. The women were very uplifting and supportive of me. And number two is the Thanksgiving potluck that I held in my dormitory. I was feeling really homesick, so I planned a dinner party at my dormitory. I made most of the food, which included green bean casserole, tater tot hot dish, baked and barbecue chicken, and I made all of it in a toaster oven, so quite the feat. So those are my two most memorable times in Japan.
Yeah, thank you very much for getting me very hungry right now. I appreciate that. That sounds absolutely delicious. Wow. Yusuke, tell me about a memorable experience you had on the program.
There were many memorable experiences there. One of the wonderful experiences is the story was the teammates in entrepreneurship class I took in the first quarter. At that time, just after I arrived at the US, my English skill was limited, so I couldn't convey my opinions very clearly, but they always listen to me carefully with patience. So they always helped me a lot. They helped me give a presentation about our business ideas. Without them, especially Will, which is the name of my best friend there, I couldn't get things done. So that is the very precious memory for me there.
That's fantastic. You know, I think one of the things that sets apart traveling from living abroad is that we have the unique opportunity and privilege of living in a new environment and experiencing a culture firsthand. But one of the challenges that comes with living in a new culture is culture shock. So I'd like to ask a little bit about that because it happens to the best of us, even if we're experiencing living and traveling overseas when we're thrust into a new environment. Now, I think Dejaya had hinted a little bit at how she coped with culture shock. Dejaya, when you talked about food, can you tell me a little bit more about how you coped with culture shock?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So food was a real struggle for me when I first arrived in Japan for study abroad. Right before departing for Japan, I realized that I didn't particularly like a lot of the Japanese foods I tasted in America, aside from ramen and sushi. And there were not a lot of Japanese restaurants in the area I lived. So in the first weeks of being in Japan, I lost quite a bit of weight just from under eating. And so as a self-proclaimed foodie, I had to fix this. So through some super sleuthing and networking, I found out that there was an unofficial cooking club at Nanzan that met off campus. This club was a savior as it provided recipes that tasted good and were easy to replicate. And it was a great language immersion opportunity for me as I was one of the only regular attending exchange students.
So, Dejaya, you've just said something that I've never heard anyone ever say before. I was living in Japan and I lost weight. That's incomprehensible, and I wish truly that I could say the same for myself. But I'm twice the man now today than I was when I first arrived. Well, that's fantastic. I think food is one of those things that people tend to miss from home after the initial sort of awesomeness of being presented with new menus and new food options. And that is certainly one way that we can reconnect with home. Yusuke, did you miss any particular dishes from home when you were in the States? How did you cope with culture shock? And what kind of culture shock did you have?
So actually, I miss a lot about Japanese foods. But actually, after I arrived at the US, I ate many pizza and I gained my weight.
So what was the thing what was the Japanese dish you missed the most when you were in the States?
So the food I missed the most was sushi, because I wanted to eat fish in the US very much. But that's okay because I think learning about the food culture is one of the important experiences in studying abroad. And so I want to say about the culture shock in the class I took. So just after I arrived at the US, I was really surprised that all of the classmates in the US were willing to express their opinion actively, regardless of their backgrounds. So I like the atmosphere of the class filled with much energy and much curiosity for learning. But actually, I was really struggling with keeping up with the discussion. But I wanted to join the discussion, so I always raised my hand and stopped the discussion. So I want to say that I wanted to express my opinion. So everyone plays it. Everyone embraces my opinion, listening to my opinions. So yeah, so I think one of the important solutions for coping with culture shock is opening up. So honesty is very important to coping with culture shock. And so that's the thing I learned in the US.
Yusuke, that's a great example of the differences between the United States and Japan, at least as far as students are concerned. I know as an English teacher here in Japan, I had to struggle to get my students to respond to me. And I know that in American classrooms, there's an expectation that students raise their hands, contribute to the class, ask the teachers questions. So that is a big difference between the classroom environment in the States and in Japan. And I think your remedy for that, just diving right into it, raising your hand, embracing that difference is bold and probably the right way to go. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think Japanese students tend to be shy, but I think Japanese students have as great abilities as American students have. So I want to say that they should unleash their potential in the class.
I think you've just given us the motto or the slogan for this entire panel discussion: unleash yourself. Don't hold back. So we've talked a little bit about culture shock, and we accept that this is part of the normal process of living in a new culture. But I want to move on to a more substantial and more serious shock, and that's the shock of the global pandemic that we've all been grappling with since for almost a year now, or coming up on a year. Tell me, how has COVID impacted your lives? Dejaya, let's start with you. What has been the impact on your day-to-day, your career prospects, your studying, and how has COVID affected you?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to study abroad right before COVID really broke out and started sending students home. But yeah, after I came back, I had already applied for JET program while I was studying abroad and was going through the process, and I got that wonderful email that I was accepted and I'd be going in September. It was just a matter of time at that point. Then everything started closing down. Events were being postponed left and right, and then me and my fellow JET accepted people were just like, what's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to us? And there was a period of kind of limbo where there was no date for departure. And so a lot of people, including myself, had to think about plan Bs. We were back on the job hunt for a lot of the time. I had a lot of pressure in my family. They were like, well, you probably aren't going to Japan, so you need to find a job. And I was like, but I don't want to lose hope. So that is it was a lot of back and forth emotions of having hope and being hopeless. Some lessons though from this disruption and some things that I've learned. One, don't take rituals for granted. Rituals, what do I mean by rituals, right? So whether they be for celebration or for mourning, I think humans created rituals to help process emotions. And this year, so many key rituals were canceled due to the global pandemic. I've missed a number of celebrations, like my graduation, as well as funerals this year. And it's hard not being able to properly grieve. Number two is patience. My start to full adulthood has basically been postponed. It's been hard, but with patience, I know my time will come, hopefully January 6th.
Thank you. Yusuke, how has COVID-19 affected your life?
COVID-19 changed everything relating to my study abroad experience. My campus life was not affected until the end of this February, but since the beginning of this March, the situation changed completely because of the beginning of the pandemic in the US. The government and the university made many decisions rapidly. At first, I couldn't take in-person classes, and finally I had to return to Japan suddenly. I was a little bit confused by many decisions which were volatile. But generally, I could stay calm. I always try to collect the right information in order to find a better path to the future, like find a plan B, for the future. One of the lessons I learned is that we can keep moving forward by grasping the situation, empowering each other, and working together hand in hand. We can find the silver lining in this uncertain cloud together. So that's the lesson I learned.
Thank you. Yeah, one of my jobs here at the U.S. Embassy is to promote studying abroad and encouraging young people to study in the U.S. And also, I sit on the Fulbright Commission, one of our exchange programs, the flagship exchange programs. And we had, all the problems that both of you have mentioned in terms of trying to figure out how best to handle students who were sent from Japan to study in the United States, but also some American scholars on the Fulbright program who were sent here to Japan. And I remember in those early months, between February and May, when there was so much uncertainty and everything was still sort of new and frightening in many ways. And I remember thinking at the time that, soon this will pass. And I think that Dejaya, you mentioned having patience, and I think that everyone's patience has been tested, but it's important to have that along with what connections we have with family and friends, the ritual of friendship, so important to keeping up our mental and physical health. And it's of course, all of us have been dealing with this for so long that it really has tested us. But I think, Yusuke, you're right that, we can overcome this. We need to be together, but it is a struggle. But I think there are some lessons to come out of this as well. And I want to ask you both, what is the role of the next generation of leaders, both in the United States and Japan? What role can they play in this new normal of the pandemic that we have? Dejaya, any thoughts on what young people can do from this experience?
Certainly. I've been working through this myself, like how can me and myself like cope in this new normal, and what role can I play? And I've found ways to still interact with my community, but with with keeping in mind that it's a pandemic. So for my weekly volunteering with North Ave Mission in inner city Baltimore, we do all our volunteering outside, and we try to implement as many social distancing measures as possible, because just because everything is shut down and there's a pandemic doesn't mean the homeless stop being homeless. They still need to eat, they still need coats, they still need all these different resources. And at the beginning, a lot of their lifelines were just shut down, food pantries and whatnot. So we just have fold out tables in an empty lot, and we, put our groceries, we have everybody put on gloves and hand sanitizers, and we consistently give out masks to everyone we give out masks to anyone who doesn't have a mask, and we ask if they need extra. So just finding ways that we can still engaged with community, all while following guidelines. We need to protect ourselves and each other.
Oh, that's great. I think, a lot of people when faced with a crisis think so much about themselves, but being able to remember that we're all part of something much larger than ourselves. And as you mentioned, the homeless are still homeless, the poor are still poor. They still need help. And taking some of that, the pain that we have about and maybe in some cases, self-pity or concern about our own station in life and where we are, and turning that into action to help other people, I think is a great sort of silver lining to this cloud, that you've been able to find something that is important to the community, and keeping in mind our obligation and responsibility to the rest of society during a crisis is still important. Yusuke, what do you think that the next generation of leaders will take out of this crisis? What have they learned about this global pandemic?
We can play a great role of like cheering people around us up. So I think so leadership is like believing. So that's my definition. So believing myself, believing others, believing in our bonds. We can live in the hope that we can get over this adversity. And actually, I think we should never forget to keep smiling. So because yeah, I think so. Anytime we can find small happiness, I think a smile is more contagious than the virus, right? So I think so. Please show people your smile in order to cheer them up. So that is a very important role we younger generation can play.
No, thank you, Yusuke. I think that's absolutely right, and that goes back to what we were just saying about our obligation to community. And I think you're right. When we can help make other people happy, that in turn makes us happy. That is so important, I think, to remember that we're not the only ones in this crisis. That there are our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, our friends, our family. Everyone is grappling with this in their own way, and people handle it differently. Any other lessons you think for the next generation coming out of the pandemic?
So can I add one thing?
Yeah.
Being compassionate for others is very important. So like we younger generation leaders should empathize with others, and we should reassure people around us that that is the secret of getting over every adversity together. So yeah, so this is the lesson I want to tell you about. I learned.
Yeah. Leadership is about, I think, transcending the self and thinking of the other. And that's the only way you can lead, is by making sure that the people that you are leading are okay. So thank you. Now I'd like to ask probably the most important question of the panel, since we're here to talk about study abroad. What advice would you give to a young person who's interested in studying in the United States? Jajaya, let me start with you as an American. What sort of advice would you give to a Japanese person who's thinking of studying in the United States?
Advice to a Japanese person who's thinking about studying abroad in the United States. So yes, let's see. I'd say first things first, they're gonna have to break out of their shell. When they break out of their shell, don't be afraid, because no one's going to attack you. For the most part, people are friendly. I was a resident assistant on campus, and I was on like the intercultural kind of floor. And so they tried to put as many exchange students and Americans on the floor as possible so they can, do the exchange thing. And since they knew that I knew some Japanese, they tried to put like as many Japanese students as they could on my floor so I could be able to help them a little bit in Japanese. And so, I would always encourage them to come to events. And one thing that was great that I did, I tried to each month have a program that featured each exchange student's different cultures. So some people from Germany, some people from France, some people from Japan. And so I asked them, what's your favorite snack, or what's your favorite food that's easy to make? And so we made, I can't remember what it's called, but it's strawberry mochi, basically, where you have the mochi and then the red bean and the strawberry in the middle. And so we made that together as a floor, and I had one of my Japanese students tell a little bit about what they liked about it, and people could ask questions. And so that kind of made them feel more welcomed, and being able to share their culture as well as other students, learn from them and connect. So yes, don't be afraid to break out of your shell, because no one will hurt you.
That's great advice. And I think that oftentimes Japanese students are worried about their English speaking ability and their ability to communicate. And I think in a university setting, not a problem. I think people understand that students come from afar, and that English is a second language. And and the only way you're going to improve is by practice, practice, practice. And so I think coming out of your shell is critical to getting the most out of your education in the United States. You talked about food again, and I think that you are an excellent practitioner of what we call food diplomacy. as a diplomat for more than 20 years now, I totally agree that food is one of the ways and one of the best ways of bringing people together and sort of breaking down barriers and having that sort of connection with someone, sharing food from your culture with someone else, understanding the importance of food in another culture are all vital to connection and building those bridges of friendship. It's harder to do, I think, in this environment where everything is done virtually, but we've done virtual dinner parties here because we still recognize that having food together is important. Thank you for bringing that up. Yusuke, let me ask you, as a young Japanese man yourself, what advice would you give to a Japanese student who's interested in studying in the United States?
So I totally agree with Dejir's advice. So do not be afraid to fail. Yeah, that's my advice. Do not miss your great chance. So if you are thinking about studying abroad, go for it. So I want to say, let's open the door to the world. So actually, just before I left Japan for the US, I worried too much about new life there because that was the first time for me to stay in a foreign country for a long term. Also, I was a poor speaker of English, so yeah, I was very frightened. I worried about a lot of things, but now, without doubt, I can say that the studying abroad experience was life-changing for me. So without that, I would never be who I am today. So I'm really happy to. So actually, of course, there were many things not doing well, but that's okay. So I made many mistakes. I faced many difficulties, but every challenges made me forward. So now I am very happy to be here after I develop myself during my stay in the US. And I want to say that if you fail, no one insults you. So perform it. So everyone plays and everyone places and embraces your challenge, curiosity, and passion. Yeah, I think people are also waiting for you. So yeah, give it a shot. So that's my advice.
That's great advice to end this panel discussion, Yusuke. Thank you. I love what you say about don't be afraid to fail. And that's absolutely true. If you want to succeed and be successful, you have to roll the dice and take the risk of failing. And I think history is littered with failures who went on to great success. And I think that if there's any place that is safe to fail, it's at university. That's the time for you to really to experiment and to stretch and to challenge yourself. So that's fantastic advice. And of course, the biggest challenge is just making those first steps to studying abroad and then getting to the campus in the United States. I want to thank the panelists. Thank you both very much for your insights and thoughts. This has been a wonderful chance to talk about being in the United States and the challenges that we've all faced with culture shock, COVID shock. And I hope that those of you who have tuned in take advantage of the opportunities that lay before you as future leaders and embrace the opportunity to study abroad. Now, I'd like to turn it back to our MC. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you, panelists, for being a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.